90 minutes after the drill became stuck, the drilling crew, who had wisely abandoned the tilting rig, watched in amazement from the shore as their 150-foot derrick disappeared into a lake that was less than 10 feet deep. Meanwhile, 1,300 feet below the surface of Lake Peigneur, diamond crystal miners, who had not been alerted to a problem, looked up to see something you should never see in a salt mine. Water.
Water flowing through salt tends to dissolve the salt. As you increase the volume of water, you increase the volume of salt that can be dissolved.
Soon it was clear. Lake Peigneur was draining through the hole bored by the drill bit and into the salt mine. As the 2.5 billion gallons of Lake Peigneur surged into the mine with 10 times the pressure of a fire hydrant, a mighty whirlpool was forming on the surface. Remarkably, thanks to well-rehearsed evacuation drills and the heroics of several miners, all 55 people in the mine managed to get out. But back on the surface, the chaos was just beginning.
The whirlpool is basically a vortex of water and mud that is flowing down into a fairly confined space. And that whirlpool is basically flowing downwards under the force of gravity, pulling sediment and other materials down with it.
The whirlpool's sucking force pulled heavy-duty barges toward it as their crews leapt for safety. Men watched with jaws agape as 11 barges and a tugboat disappeared into the vortex. Those are 4 fully loaded flatbed trucks spinning helplessly in the whirlpool. When a barge that was blocking the way was sucked into the hole, it gave Viator a narrow path to skirt the maelstrom. He gunned the motor and reached the shore with seconds to spare. Viator then tied his boat to a tree.
When I looked like this, I seen my boat that I had tied to the tree, and there it was going into the whirlpool. So that's the last thing I've seen, my boat tied up to the tree going into the hole.
By that point, the whirlpool was sucking down Jefferson Island itself. Before evening, 65 acres of land, including much of Live Oak Gardens, would end up at the bottom of the mine. 150-year-old trees were snapped in half.
There were pecan trees that were 150 feet tall down here in this woods, and to stand there and watch them drop completely out of sight was, yeah.
Along the shoreline, along the Live Oak Gardens and the Jefferson Island Mansion, you're basically seeing what are called landslides, where the ground is actually shearing and breaking apart, and gravity's pulling these blocks down into the hole.
Look at this over here, look! Look at that going in there. Look at this!
That house that we were standing on, all you see now is a chimney. The house sank about 30 feet.
Could things get worse? Yes. Delcom Canal, which normally flowed away from Lake Peigneur and into the Gulf of Mexico, actually reversed direction under the intense sucking power of the whirlpool. As the water rushed into the now nearly empty lake bed, it formed a 150-foot waterfall, the highest ever in Louisiana.
But that's the only time the Gulf of Mexico flowed north, basically. So that's a lot of water, to fill up that hole.
As the water rushed into the mine, its rapid displacement of the underground caverns shot a deafening blast of compressed air, and later, a 400-foot geyser up from the mine shaft.
To see something like this, it was terrible, really. I thought it was the end of the world.
It took 2 days for the canal's water to fill up the mine and Lake Peigneur. When the water pressure equalized, 9 of the 11 sunk barges popped up like corks in a bathtub. The drilling operation and the underground salt mine were complete losses. The cause of the disaster was never officially determined, since all the evidence was at the bottom of a 1,500-foot water-filled salt mine. But there's no definitive evidence that the mine itself was structurally unsound. The culprit was most likely a 14-inch wide drill bit. This engineering disaster did have at least one positive effect. It made Lake Peigneur a little more interesting.
It's a shallow lake, and now we have part of it that's a deep lake. So it's changed the type of fish that live in the lake. And we catch redfish and saltwater species that were not very prevalent here before.
But not everyone is planning a fishing trip to Lake Benure.
What I went through and got out of there alive, I don't care for it, really. I prefer buying my fish.
It can hardly be said that the Jefferson Island disaster had a happy ending. The loss to livelihoods and cherished property was devastating. Yet the fact that no human beings perished was fortunate indeed. For if there's one lesson to take from this strange engineering disaster, it's that a small mistake can have huge consequences.